Undercover boss orders apple pie, notices the filling and immediately calls the restaurant manager. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The plate was warm when it landed in front of him. Golden crust, dusted with sugar, the kind of thing diners love to claim is famous since 1963. He pressed the fork through gently. The crust flaked, but inside it wasn't apples. The texture was off. The filling thick, starchy, heavy. He froze for just a second, then whispered under his breath, "This isn't apple pie." The waitress, neat vest, hair tied back, stiff smile, paused mid-step. She didn't turn, didn't answer. Her eyes flickered, just once, then drifted away like nothing had been said. To her, it wasn't new. To him, it was the first crack. The coffee beside him steamed faintly, bitter scent masking something else, something cheaper. A chipped mug, rings from 100 shifts washed too fast. He lifted it, sipped once, and set it down again. The taste wasn't wrong, but the feeling was. Something here was off balance, and he knew it. Around the room, no one noticed. Customers leaned back in red vinyl booths, talking about baseball, politics, the weather. A jukebox hummed faintly against the wall, half the lights burnt out. A man in a baseball cap turned the page of his newspaper, not looking up. For them, it was just another Tuesday morning. For him, it was data. Jackson Reeves, age 52, founder and CEO of Sunrise Restaurant Group, was not here for breakfast. Not really. He was here to see what no spreadsheet ever showed. And this pie, this crust, hiding something else inside, was the opening note of a song he'd been hearing from a distance for months. He adjusted the cap on his head, leaned back against the booth, and watched. The waitress her name tag said Marla moved quickly, but with a weight in her steps. She poured coffee, balanced plates, smiled at customers who didn't smile back. And yet, when she passed his table, she glanced down for just a second, eyes on the filling. She knew. Jackson didn't speak. He let the silence linger, let the wrongness settle. From the corner of his eye, he saw the manager step out of the back. Crisp shirt, polished shoes, pen clipped to the pocket, confident stride. He didn't glance at the tables. He looked at the register. Always at the register. He adjusted a setting on the screen, tapped twice, and nodded to the young server standing beside it. A subtle gesture, but one Jackson caught immediately. The pie wasn't just about cheap ingredients, it was about choices. And choices, when repeated enough times, became systems. He took out an old leather notebook, edges worn, a relic from his earliest days training managers. He hadn't written in it for years. This morning, he opened it again. On the first blank page, in slow, steady handwriting, he wrote 6 words. Pie filling changed. Staff complicit silence. The waitress walked past again, tray balanced, voice low as she spoke to another customer. Jackson caught fragments. "It's just the way at Island," said, without bitterness, without shock, like it was normal. And that was worse than the pie itself. He sipped his coffee again, cold now. The bitterness clung to his tongue, not from the roast, from the truth it carried. 3 booths over, a couple laughed over pancakes. By the door, a regular folded a receipt into his pocket. The jukebox clicked, static filling the pause before the next track. Life went on. The wrong hid in plain sight, and in that moment, Jackson knew this wasn't a mistake. It was a system, and a system could be traced. The investigation had just begun. Jackson didn't leave. He leaned back in the booth, arms relaxed, like any tired traveler killing time over breakfast. But his eyes never stopped moving. Every detail mattered. From the corner, he could see the waitress again, Marla. The same soft smile, the same deliberate pace. She refilled mugs without being asked, cleared plates before anyone noticed. It wasn't speed. It wasn't flash. It was presence. She worked like she cared, even when no one else did. But something about the others felt different. Two younger servers lingered near the register, shirts pressed, hair slicked, not a stain on their aprons. Yet neither carried a tray. Neither spoke to customers unless it involved a bill. They stood guard over the glowing POS screen like it was treasure. Jackson noticed every swipe went through them, and only them. A man at the counter finished his burger, slipped a tip onto the tray. One of the boys swooped in, tapped the screen, pocketed the receipt. The tip vanished into digital space. Marlon never touched the register once, not even close. Jackson let his fork hover over the pie, pretending to eat while his mind worked. He designed Sunrise's system to prevent this exact problem: role-based access, transparent reporting, equal distribution of digital tips. On paper, it was foolproof, but in front of him, the system was being bent in real time. When Marla returned to collect his empty coffee mug, Jackson tilted his head slightly, speaking just loud enough for her to hear. "Don't you take payments yourself?" She didn't stop moving. She stacked the cup on her tray, leaned closer as if wiping a crumb from the table. Her voice dropped low, almost lost under the hum of the jukebox. "I don't have access." He raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" Her lips barely moved. "I'm listed as supplemental staff. That role doesn't swipe cards. And if you don't swipe cards, you don't get digital tips." Then she straightened, plastered the polite smile back on, and walked away. Jackson's chest tightened. Supplemental staff. Invisible list. He'd heard whispers about it months ago, but never saw proof. Until now. The manager reappeared at the counter, laughing with a regular, tapping the POS like it was his personal property. The boy at his side nephew maybe nodded obediently, soaking up instructions. Jackson watched them long enough to see the pattern. Only certain roles had access. Those roles led to money, and the man who set the roles stood right there in a pressed shirt, smiling as though nothing was wrong. A few minutes later, Marla circled back. She placed the check quietly on his table, but slipped something else under his saucer, a folded piece of paper, edges creased from being carried too long. She didn't look at him. She didn't stop moving. Just kept walking like nothing had happened. Jackson waited until she disappeared behind the counter, before sliding the note into his hand. Inside were scribbled numbers, dates, tables, tip amounts, simple records, written by hand. At the bottom, 4 words. "It never adds up." His throat tightened. This wasn't just frustration. This was evidence. He looked up. Marla stood across the room, wiping down a booth, pretending not to watch. For a moment, their eyes met. No words, no nods, just an unspoken understanding. She had carried this truth quietly, waiting for someone who would actually see it. Jackson slipped the paper into his notebook. His pulse quickened, not from anger but from clarity. The system wasn't failing. It was being rewritten. The question wasn't whether fraud existed. It was who had the power to hide it. The bell above the door jingled as another customer walked in, shaking off the morning drizzle. Life moved on, normal and quiet. But at booth number 5, the man in the baseball cap had just uncovered the first thread of something much bigger. And once you pulled the first thread, the whole fabric began to unravel. The investigation wasn't coming. It had already started. Jackson sat motionless for a while, notebook resting against his palm, the folded slip from Marla tucked safely inside. He didn't need to open it again. The handwriting had already burned itself into his mind. Dates, tables, tip amounts, every line, a quiet protest. Every number, a proof that something here wasn't right. He glanced at the register again. The young server, Tyler, his name tag read, was tapping the screen like he owned it. Not clumsy, not hesitant. Smooth, confident. His fingers moved with the ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times, flicking between settings most staff shouldn't even see. At that exact moment, another employee, a new hire by the looks of it, apron still stiff, shoes too clean, hesitated at table 3, unsure how to process a comped meal. Jackson watched her approach the register. Tray balanced awkwardly. She asked Tyler for help. He didn't even look up, just waved her off. "Figure it out," he muttered. The trainee froze, cheeks red. A plate tilted dangerously in her hands. Before it could fall, Marla swooped in, steadying it with one arm while whispering instructions. She guided the trainee step by step, showing her how to flag the order correctly, how to mark a comp without triggering a manager override. Her voice never rose above the hum of the room, but her calm steadiness cut through the tension like a light. Jackson saw it clearly. Marla wasn't just doing her job. She was holding the place together while others chose to look away. He lowered his gaze to the coffee cup in front of him. The liquid had gone cold long ago, but he lifted it anyway, covering the small motion as he snapped a discreet photo of Marla's note with his phone. Each entry, each number, captured silently. Then, pulling out an old ballpoint pen, he scribbled a quick message on a sticky note from his pocket. "Keep documenting. Don't give this to anyone else. Wait for me to return." He slipped the note inside her paper record and slid the coffee cup just enough to cover it. No one noticed. Across the diner, the manager, Brad Coleman, stepped back from the counter, laughing with a regular, as though he hadn't just reprogrammed a system meant for fairness. His posture was relaxed, but his shadow loomed over everything. Jackson's jaw tightened. He didn't need an outburst here. He needed patterns. He needed proof. And proof, he realized, was already falling into his lap. Chase, another employee, approached the register after Tyler stepped aside. He tapped the screen once, then frowned. "Weird. Yesterday I had access. Today it says restricted." Tyler smirked. "Probably just a glitch. I'll take care of it." Jackson didn't miss it. That single exchange was confirmation. Roles were being reassigned quietly, visibility stripped away, all under Brad's authority. What looked like simple configuration was theft in disguise. He gripped the edge of his notebook. Every instinct in him screamed to stand up, to call Brad out on the spot. But instincts weren't enough. Not for a CEO. He needed something airtight, something that couldn't be denied. When Marla passed again, he kept his tone casual. "Busy morning?" Her reply was soft, almost mechanical. "Morning shifts don't get many tips. At least, not for most of us." The words hit him harder than the coffee ever could. Not for most of us. Jackson leaned back against the vinyl booth, eyes narrowing. On the surface, the diner looked like every other Sunrise location. Familiar decor, neon sign buzzing outside, regulars at the counter. But underneath, someone had rewritten the rules. The rain outside had stopped. A thin shaft of light filtered through the blinds, catching the dust in the air. Jackson stared at it, steady and silent, then pulled out his phone again. He didn't make a call, not yet. But he typed a single name into a draft message. Mara Lynn, head of internal investigations. The one person he trusted to dismantle schemes without making noise. Not yet, he told himself. First, one more confirmation, one more piece of the puzzle. He set the phone down, watching as Tyler slid back behind the register, the manager nodding approvingly from the corner. The pie on his plate had collapsed into mush, the crust soggy from sitting too long. He pushed it aside. The taste didn't matter anymore. The truth did. And truth, once uncovered, never stayed buried for long. The silent audit was about to begin. By the time Jackson stepped back into the drizzle that afternoon, the decision was made. He didn't need more coffee. He didn't need more pie. What he needed was clarity, and clarity required action. He sat in his truck for a long moment, windshield streaked with rain, the neon diner sign glowing faintly behind him. Then he pulled out his phone. "Mara," he said, his voice low but steady. "We have a problem." "Oh." On the other end of the line, there was no surprise, no hesitation. Mara Lynn, head of internal investigations for Sunrise, had been with him 7 years. She had unraveled 3 embezzlement rings without a headline, dismantled 2 fraudulent supplier contracts without a whisper. She didn't need a speech. She just needed direction. "The POS system at Branch 17 is being manipulated," Jackson continued. "Roles reassigned. Tips diverted. I need you to go in quiet, line by line, every transaction, every override." "Understood," she replied. That was all. Within the hour, the POS terminal at the diner had been switched into silent audit mode. To the staff, nothing changed. The screen looked the same, payments processed as usual, but underneath, every keystroke, every role adjustment, every hidden tier was being mirrored to a secure server. For the first time in months, the system itself was watching back. The first findings came the next morning. Finding number 1, a hidden access tier labeled Preferred Internal, not visible on the standard staff permissions screen, applied to exactly 3 accounts. Brad Coleman, manager. Tyler C., part-time server. A third entry, kitchen support 03. That third account raised a flag immediately. Finding number 2. Over the last 30 days, digital tip totals across the branch exceeded $4,800. Of that, 67% had been routed through Tyler's account, even though his service volume accounted for less than 15% of tickets. Finding number 3. Payroll listed a part-time kitchen employee named Marcus Hill, supposedly clocked in for 21 of the last 25 mornings. But Marcus Hill didn't exist in HR records. No onboarding file. No tax forms. The Social Security number tied to his profile had already been flagged in another branch 2 years ago during an unfinished investigation. Back then, the manager of that branch had been Brad Coleman. Jackson read the report in silence, jaw tightening. Fraud wasn't just a possibility. It was a pattern, a method. At 7 a.m., he returned to the diner, cap pulled low again, sliding into the same corner booth. He didn't need to order. Marla noticed him and brought a fresh cup of coffee anyway. She placed it down gently, almost like a question. He nodded once, a silent answer. "Keep going. I see you." The register beeped across the room. Tyler swiped a card, leaned back, arms crossed like a king on his throne. Brad emerged from the back office, crisp shirt, easy smile. To every regular, he looked like the perfect manager, competent, friendly, efficient. But Jackson had the numbers now. And numbers didn't smile. Numbers didn't lie. He opened his notebook and wrote a single line. Preferred internal equals shadow account. Marla passed again, carrying plates for table 9. She glanced at him, the faintest flicker of hope in her eyes. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. By midday, Mara sent a final note through the secure channel. The shell entity receiving service fees from Branch 17 matched an LLC registered out of state. Payments went out every Friday. The amounts lined up to the missing tip differentials, down to the dollar. The listed contact email had once belonged to Brad Coleman. Jackson closed his eyes, letting the weight of it sink in. The system wasn't broken. It had been hijacked, and the hijacker was standing 20 feet away, laughing with customers, wiping his hands clean as if nothing was wrong. The rain had stopped outside, but inside Jackson, a storm was building. This wasn't just about apple pie anymore. It was about trust, about integrity, and about how quickly both could rot when no one was watching. The audit had begun. The reckoning was next. By the third morning, Jackson no longer tasted the coffee. He didn't come for flavor anymore. He came for confirmation. And every day the pattern grew sharper. Tyler handled nearly every card payment. Brad drifted between the back office and the counter, always hovering near the register. Chase lingered at tables but never touched the screen again. And Marla, she carried the weight of the diner, one quiet shift at a time. Jackson let the scene replay like data points, each movement another entry in an invisible ledger. He didn't need drama. He needed consistency. And now, he had it. Late that morning, the trainee from 2 days ago stumbled again, this time over a comp request. She froze by table 5, hands shaking, unsure how to key it in. Tyler rolled his eyes, muttering just loud enough for Jackson to hear. "Not my problem. Ask someone else." Marla stepped in immediately, calm, patient, showing the trainee exactly how to adjust the order code. Her voice dipped low, almost conspiratorial, as she added, "Don't let Tyler help you. He won't. And if he does, it won't be right." Jackson caught every word. He didn't flinch, didn't react, but the truth pressed deeper. Marla wasn't just a good employee. She was the only one resisting a tilted system. He scribbled a note in his book. Integrity visible only at bottom. That afternoon, Mara's final audit file hit his phone. 30 days of transactions mapped line by line. The hidden access tier, the fabricated employee, the shell LLC siphoning money every Friday. It was no longer suspicion. It was proof. Jackson stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. His reflection stared back from the dark glass. The disguised flannel shirt, worn cap, looked ordinary, but behind it was the founder of Sunrise, holding the kind of evidence that could bring down careers in seconds. He looked across the diner. Brad was shaking hands with a customer at the counter, smile wide, posture confident. Tyler leaned against the register like a gatekeeper of other people's wages. To the untrained eye, it was just another busy morning. To Jackson, it was the calm before a storm. He closed the notebook gently, sliding it back into his jacket. The decision was no longer if, but when. He wouldn't flip the table here, not yet. Confrontation without control was chaos. He needed precision. He needed timing. Marla passed once more, dropping off a fresh pot of coffee. Her hand trembled slightly as she set it down, but her eyes met his for a second longer than before. She didn't know who he was, not yet, but she knew he was watching. And that was enough. Jackson raised the cup, took a slow sip, and set it down with finality. The audit was complete, the evidence airtight. Next time he walked through these doors, it wouldn't be as a stranger. It would be as the man who built the company. And then, the reckoning would begin. 3 days after that first slice of pie, the same neon sign flickered above the diner doors. But this time, the man who walked in wasn't wearing a cap or flannel. Jackson Reeves stepped across the threshold in a pressed navy jacket, posture steady, presence undeniable. He didn't look like a customer anymore. He looked like what he was, the founder of Sunrise. And though no one realized it yet, the room was seconds away from turning upside down. The bell above the door jingled faintly. Tyler glanced up from the register, then back down at the screen, dismissive. Brad looked over briefly, nodded politely to what he assumed was another suit on business travel, then returned to chatting with a regular. Only Marla noticed something different. She froze mid-pour, her hand tightening slightly on the coffee pot. She didn't know his name, not yet, but she knew the quiet man from the corner booth was no longer hiding. Jackson walked to the same table he had occupied all week. He sat down slowly, placed his leather notebook on the table, and waited. Moments later, Brad approached with a rehearsed smile. "Morning, sir. Can I get you started?" Jackson met his eyes for the first time. Calm. Level. "I didn't come for breakfast," he said. "I came for answers." Brad's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" Jackson opened the notebook, sliding Marla's folded records onto the table. Columns of numbers, circled totals, handwritten notes. Then he placed his phone beside it, the audit report glowing on the screen. "You've been rerouting tips through restricted access. You created accounts that don't exist. And you've been paying an LLC tied directly back to you." The words landed heavy, sharp as glass. The chatter in the diner slowed. Tyler straightened behind the register, confusion spreading into panic. Chase froze mid-step, plate trembling in his hand. Brad's voice thinned. "Sir, I don't know who you think you are." Jackson cut him off, his tone quiet but final. "I'm the man who built this company, and I know exactly who you are." The silence that followed was louder than any shout. Marla stood frozen by the counter, eyes wide, her secret notebook now open in plain sight. Customers shifted uneasily in their seats, sensing something bigger than a simple argument. Brad's face drained of color. He tried to laugh, but no sound came out. Tyler stared at the floor, arms stiff at his sides. Jackson leaned back in the booth, voice steady, controlled. "You don't get to rewrite fairness. Not here, not anywhere. And today, that ends." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Authority wasn't in volume, it was in truth. And in that moment, everyone in the diner understood. The stranger they had ignored all week wasn't a stranger at all. The real reckoning had just begun. Brad's smirk cracked faster than the crust of the pie Jackson had refused to finish days earlier. He shifted his weight, glancing toward Tyler, as if the younger man could supply an answer. Tyler looked back blankly, jaw clenched, fingers twitching near the register. Jackson didn't move. He simply tapped the notebook with one finger. "These aren't opinions. They're records. 30 days of numbers. Every tip logged by hand. And here," he lifted his phone, turning the screen just enough for Brad to see, "is the audit you never thought anyone would run." Brad swallowed hard. I don't know what this island. Probably a mistake." "Number." Jackson's voice cut through the diner like a clean break. "Mistakes don't form patterns. Patterns form systems. And you built one for yourself." The hum of the jukebox seemed louder in the silence that followed. A couple near the door leaned forward, whispers falling quiet. Chase set down the plate he'd been holding and stepped back, his face pale. Marla stood frozen, coffee pot in her hand, watching the words she had once scribbled in private now spoken out loud. Jackson continued. Steady, surgical, 7% of digital tips routed through Tyler's account. Service volume less than 15%. Payroll listing an employee who doesn't exist. And service fees sent to an out-of-state LLC registered under your old email, Brad. That isn't negligence, that's fraud. Brad's lips parted, but nothing came out. The weight of proof pressed harder than any accusation. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence draining fast. Finally, Brad snapped. You can't prove this in front of everyone. You don't have the authority. Jackson leaned forward, eyes locked on him. I have every authority. My name is on the founding documents of this company. Every paycheck here exists because of what I built, and you used that trust to steal from the people who work hardest. The words landed heavy. The room was still. Every customer and employee now witness. Tyler dropped his gaze, face burning. Chase whispered, almost involuntarily, I knew something was wrong. Jackson turned slightly, his voice carrying just enough for everyone to hear. Fairness isn't optional. It's the foundation, and when someone tries to erase it, the whole house falls. Brad's hands trembled. The polished smile he wore like armor had collapsed. For the first time, his authority wasn't just questioned, it was gone. Jackson didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply placed his phone flat on the table. The screen glowed with transaction logs, red circles, shell accounts, truth, visible to anyone who looked. Exposure didn't need volume. It only needed light. And in that diner, the light was blinding. Brad's denial collapsed under the weight of silence. The customers who once looked past Jackson now stared openly. Employees who had whispered doubts now saw them confirmed in black and white. Jackson didn't shout. He didn't need to. He stood slowly, placing the notebook under his arm, phone still glowing with the audit file. Brad Coleman, he said evenly, you're done here. The words carried across the diner, final and unshakable. Brad tried one last protest. You can't fire me in front of everyone. Jackson's gaze didn't waver. I'm not firing you. The system already did. Every record, every dollar rerouted, every shadow account, it's all documented. What happens next isn't a conversation, it's accountability. The color drained from Brad's face. His hands dropped to his sides, useless. Tyler shifted behind the counter, eyes darting between his uncle and the register, like the machine might save him. It wouldn't. Jackson turned toward Tyler. You're complicit. Every card swipe, every stolen tip. You're finished, too. Tyler opened his mouth but found no words. He simply stepped back, the posture of a gatekeeper replaced by the slump of someone caught. For the first time that morning, Jackson let his eyes rest on Marla. She was still holding the coffee pot, knuckles white around the handle. He gave a small nod, just enough for her to understand. You, he said, voice softer now, kept records when no one asked. You told the truth when it was easier to stay quiet. That's integrity. And integrity is what we're rebuilding this company on. Her lips parted in shock. She blinked rapidly, as if unsure if she'd heard him correctly. Customers turned, watching her now, the invisible employee suddenly seen. You won't be supplemental staff anymore, Jackson continued. You'll be leading quality training for this region. Because if one person can carry a branch's moral weight, imagine what she can do when others are listening. The words hit harder than any title. For the first time in months, Marla exhaled like a weight had finally been lifted. Jackson addressed the room one last time. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was steady. This diner isn't broken because of low margins or bad reviews. It's broken when good people believe the system no longer sees them. Today, we reset that system. Transparency in every register. Equal split in every shift. And anyone who doesn't like that won't be working here tomorrow. No one spoke. No one needed to. The message was clear. Brad stood frozen, stripped of authority. Tyler slumped by the register, silent. Marla placed the coffee pot down carefully, as if setting aside the burden she had carried alone for too long. Resolution had come, not with applause, but with clarity. And in that small diner, fairness had finally been put back on the menu. The diner didn't erupt in cheers. No applause, no dramatic music, just silence the kind that follows a verdict. Customers shifted in their seats, finishing half-eaten meals. Employees stood still, trying to absorb what had just happened. Brad and Tyler were gone, escorted quietly out the back by regional staff who arrived minutes after Jackson's call. Their absence left the diner strangely lighter, as if the air itself had been scrubbed clean. Marla stood behind the counter, wiping it down with steady hands. Not because she had to, but because it was habit. Only now, for the first time, the weight pressing on her shoulders was gone. Jackson lingered a moment longer, then slid his notebook back into his jacket. He didn't need it anymore. The story it contained had been told, in ink, in numbers, and now in truth. Outside, the morning drizzle had cleared. The neon sign buzzed faintly overhead, still declaring, "Open 24 hours." Jackson paused under its glow, watching customers filter out behind him. Some nodded respectfully, others simply walked away deep in thought. He reached for his phone, pressed the speaker, and waited. The voice of the executive board echoed clear. "Mr. Reeves, we've received your report. Branch 17 will undergo immediate restructuring. All affected staff will be reviewed, and corrective measures are already in motion." Jackson's reply was simple. "Good. But remember, systems don't change with audits alone. They change when people believe fairness is non-negotiable." As he slid the phone back into his pocket, his voice carried softly in narration, almost like a letter left behind. Fairness isn't a perk. It isn't a favor granted when convenient. Fairness is the foundation of dignity. Every day you serve a meal, pour a coffee, or take a payment, you either honor it or betray it, and the smallest betrayal spreads further than anyone sees. His eyes drifted back toward the window. Through the glass, he saw Marla laughing lightly with the trainee, showing her how to balance a tray. Not tense, not hiding, just present, visible. That, he thought, was the point. He turned, walking toward his truck. The pavement still glistened with rain, the reflection of the neon sign shimmering across it. For a moment, the diner behind him looked ordinary again, like any roadside stop in America. But to the people inside, it would never be ordinary again. Jackson opened the door, slid into the driver's seat, and rested both hands on the wheel. His expression was calm, resolute. "I didn't come here for revenge," his voiceover finished. "I came to remind them. Integrity isn't hidden in spreadsheets. It lives or dies in the choices made when no one is watching." The engine started. The truck rolled forward, headlights cutting through the last of the drizzle. The neon sign flickered once more in the rearview mirror, then vanished into distance. And with it, another branch of sunrise had been pulled back into the light.